Hi, I'm Ken Jacobson, Senior Documentary Programmer, AFI Festivals, and I want to welcome you to AFI Fest 2020, presented by Audi, and to this Q&A for the big scary S word, directed by Yael Bridge. First, I want to thank our supporters of the festivals, our presenting sponsor, Audi, our AFI members, and of course, you, our audience. We're thrilled to be one of the first couple of festivals to be screening this film, and equally thrilled today to have with us the film's director, Yael Bridge, and producer, Morgan Spector. A brief word about the two of them. Yael Bridge is an Emmy-nominated documentary filmmaker based in Oakland. She produced Left on Purpose, winner of the Audience Award at Doc NYC, and most recently, Saving Capitalism with Robert Reich, nominated for an Emmy Award in Business and Economics. As director of productions at Inequality Media, Yael has made numerous viral videos tackling complex political issues that have garnered over 200 million views on social media. She holds an MFA in documentary film and video from Stanford University and an MA in media studies from the New School. Morgan Spector is an actor and producer. Morgan's film credits include Chuck, Permission, A Vigilante, and The Drop. His TV credits include The Plot Against America, Pearson, Homeland, Boardwalk Empire, The Mist, and Allegiance. Welcome, Yael and Morgan. Thanks for being here, and congratulations on the film.
Yeah, great to be
here. First of all, great film, a very important film, very timely film. So congratulations on the film. And Yael, let's start with you. How did this film come about? Why did you want to make it? And once you decided to make it, where did you start?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was working with Robert Reich and I had just finished Saving Capitalism. And actually, while we were still working on that project, looking at the 2016 election and seeing Bernie Sanders just sort of explode, which caught me definitely by surprise. And traveling around the country while I was filming and seeing all these people who really were Bernie or Trumpers and really finding that phenomenon pretty surprising. I don't know, Morgan, how did we sync up together to start it?
I mean, you and I had, we just had a couple of exchanges around films that you were working on. I'd watched edits of things you were working on, and we'd had conversations about, I don't know, just sort of basically like note conversations and in process of things that you've been doing, and had a kind of, I just decided, I think both of us, that we'd like to do something together at some point. And then I think both of us had been seeing that same phenomenon you're describing, or this sort of reemergence of socialism as a viable force in American politics, sort of behind the Bernie Sanders campaign. And just at the same time, sort of through Twitter, I had started developing some relationships with people at Jacobson and sort of other people around the sort of socialist left, which sort of made it seem like we had a way in. We had access to sort of start talking to the people who were influencing this very nascent movement. And so, yeah, we sort of, I got in touch with Yael, who was sort of the only person I knew who could actually make a movie like this. And yeah, we started working.
So did you always know from the get-go that it was going to be a feature-length documentary? I mean, as I read in your bio, Yael, you have experience making viral videos. Obviously, there's a lot that can be done digitally. Could have been a series. Like, did it always seem like this is going to be a feature, and why?
No, it didn't. I mean, this is the first feature that I've directed. I've directed shorts. I think mainly the conversation was, should this be a feature or should this be a series? Because as we started filming and doing research and conducting interviews, it was we were just sort of floored by how much of the stuff we were learning wasn't out there. Like every single plot point in history we would get to, I can't believe there's not like a PBS on this or an American Masters, like how none of these things been sort of put into documentary form. But we for funding reasons and also, speed, we wanted to get it out as soon as possible. And so we landed on a feature, which I think is right. I mean, I feel good with what we made, and I think that was the right decision.
So in some ways, this is a relatively simple concept. Let's look at socialism in an American context. But on the other hand, it operates on multiple layers. There's many parts to it. There's the analysis of economic systems. There's the historical context, the contemporary political angle. There's regional versus national. How did you tackle this bear? Break it down and decide, okay, what are the elements we're going to focus on here?
Yeah, that was probably the hardest part, and a lot of conversations that Morgan and I and others were having in the beginning, really trying to find how to find our borders and the boundaries of the film, because there's history, there's characters, there's basic economic principles, and I think Morgan, you can say for you, I was just looking at what were the things that I found most compelling and most surprising, and really trying to not make something that was specifically comprehensive, but was going to be, oh, I didn't know that. Like, what are the aha moments? What are the juiciest pieces of history that people might not know about? And then try and weave those together to something that resembles a coherent narrative. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right, and I think it was. I mean, the sort of question of how do you tackle this bear was, that is really what the question felt like, because, as Yael said, there's more than enough to cover here for probably multiple series. I think I remember one of the big questions we faced was, is this a character-driven film, or is this is this really an observational story where we're watching a movement develop, or is this more of a kind of, idea-driven talking heads film? And I think what we've come to is, I think, a pretty highly functional compromise between the two, because we sort of, in the edit, it sort of would tilt toward one or tilt toward the other. And I think the process over the last several years has been finding that hybrid that really, as you said, sort of kept all the interesting bits and got rid of everything that was boring.
Yeah, the scope and the depth are really quite impressive. But I imagine from a producing point of view, quite daunting. For you, Morgan, as the producer, what were some of the more difficult producing challenges you faced? And Yael, I know you also are a producer on the film, so you can both feel free to jump in on this one.
This is my first real foray into the world of documentaries. So in terms of how these films are financed and produced, I just found it, I know this is to some extent changing right now, but I just found it shocking, coming from the world of narrative, that documentary film financing seems to work in reverse. First you start making the film and then people start giving you money, which is insane. That isn't how anything should ever proceed. And it's not how things work in the world of fiction. So I think some of just for me, sort of plunging forward despite constantly not having any idea how we were going to pay for the next shoot that we had to do, was something that I found really, really striking. But broadly, I love watching doc, but again, having never been intimately involved in the construction of one, the difficulty of that, the sort of mind-melting puzzle of trying to put together just these fragments of behavior and interview into something that does feel like each moment has to come after the one before it and precede the one after it. That it all has to, the way that the story unfolds is necessary. I was just shocked by how difficult it is to make a good documentary. But thankfully, I had Yael to hold my hand.
And you mentioned character-based. The two main characters in the film are Stephanie Price, the speech language pathologist, public teacher in Oklahoma, and Lee Carter, the member of the Virginia House. How did you discover these two individuals and decide to feature them in the film?
Yeah, I mean, I think we knew from the beginning that we wanted to have, I mean, once we landed on having characters and not just having, strictly talking head, we wanted someone who was looking at the socialist movement electorally and looking at someone who was looking at the socialist movement through organizing and labor unions. And so Lee was sort of pretty easy. He was one of the only socialists elected to office in that cycle. I mean, I think there were, I don't know, I'm not going to say a number. There were some nationally, but he was definitely on our radar, and he had such an amazing story because he ran against the House Majority Whip, who was a Republican. So we were just really excited to go talk to him, and he was excited to talk to us, and that was pretty easy. Finding Stephanie was in a sense a lot harder because we were in Oklahoma. We knew, we missed the West Virginia strike, and we knew Oklahoma was going to go on strike, and sort of trying to get there before the strike happened, trying to find someone who, would be involved, but wasn't, she wasn't a socialist. She wasn't, that wasn't her politics, and sort of watching her come to those politics through the strike, through organizing and what was going on nationally was just really lucky, frankly. I can't claim credit. Just Stephanie's a fantastic person and now a close friend, and I just feel really lucky to have met her.
Talk a bit about the interview subjects, your, so-called, experts. But I put that in quotes, not because they're not experts, but just because I was so impressed with the range of voices, areas of expertise, and perspectives. It was incredibly diverse and fascinating. And some of these people are quite well known, others not as well known. How did you go about choosing your interview subjects?
They were the people we were reading, the people.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. They were just the people we wanted to talk to because we were fascinated by what they had to say, in print and elsewhere. Yeah. And
you did a great job and your editor as well, who should be mentioned, intercutting those perspectives and really just, making the whole structural flow of the film work so well. So hats off to you and your editor for pulling that off.
The genius with interviews, just like truly a talent like none I've worked with on that area. So definitely all the hats off to Christy.
You kind of alluded to this earlier, but I wanted to ask a bit more about surprises along the way. As you were researching the topic and digging deeper into the history, what were some of the things that surprised you about socialism in America? And I'll just say the one that really surprised me was the Bank of North Dakota story. I had no idea that socialism had taken root in the banking system in North Dakota. So thank you for that.
Yeah, 100 years ago. It's been there for so long. I think sort of all of it, like the idea that socialism has been here for so long was like, that was the thing that surprised me the most. I think just like that it even was not it was just completely not on my radar at all. Like Bernie Sanders calling himself a socialist in 2016, I was like, why would you do that? I had no idea there was such a rich tradition. So every piece along the way was, oh, I didn't know that. And there are these giant enclaves. Milwaukee had socialist mayors for like 60 years. That's just, who knew that? It's a major, I mean, I guess if you really watch Wayne's World like a ton of times, you would know that there's like a throwaway line about that in the movie, but I wasn't watching Wayne's World all the time, so I didn't know.
How about for you, Morgan? And were there any things that didn't make it into the film that are interesting socialism in America stories that come to mind?
It's not exactly a surprise, but one thing, I mean, the founding of the Republican Party story that is in the film, I definitely did not know that. And that is a tidbit every time I read it. I mean, whatever, it makes more sense in the context of what the Republican Party was in the early 19th century. But still, it's fascinating. There was a Donna Haverty Stack, I think she's at CUNY in New York, the historian. She she talks about how this thing of how early 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century socialists saw socialism as the fulfillment of the promise of the Declaration of Independence, saw it as the only way to complete the American project. I find that idea, I mean, I guess I do find it surprising, but I just find it so compelling. I just find it beautiful and moving. And the sort of, she tells a story at one point, I'm not sure it's in the film, but that, I guess it is actually, that, you know, when they would march for May Day, they would wave American flags as opposed to the red flag, because they believe that they wanted to make sure that they wanted to integrate the two ideas. And I think that's been the accusation throughout the 20th century, that socialism is un-American, socialism, you know, stands for against everything that we ever believed. And so I think you absorb that as sort of inherently true. And the idea that there was always the sense that actually that was the way to make America its truest self, that Langston Hughes poem, Let America Be America Again. You know, I found that a beautiful idea.
You know, one of the things I really appreciated in the film was the strong connection you made between democracy and socialism. And one of your interviewees says right near the end of the film, socialism at its heart is the ultimate expression of democracy. On the flip side, how hard do you think it is for people to decouple the idea that democracy and capitalism in an American context are somehow intrinsically intertwined?
Very hard.
Very hard.
Yeah, very hard. I mean, I think that's something that we're hoping to explore with the film, and hope that in some way we can use this as a tool to deconstruct that narrative just a little bit. And I think, you know, even if you're not going to go so far as to say like capitalism and democracy are actually intrinsically opposed and incompatible, which, you know, there are certainly a compelling case to be made. You know, we can look at different ways in our own government that capitalism does fight democracy. So you could say, oh, I really don't like the Citizens United ruling. That doesn't make me a socialist, but it does make me see that the way that capitalism is sort of infiltrating our democracy is maybe not great. And so, you know, I think there's a wide spectrum, and hopefully, you know, we can push that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think one way too is just, you know, if you look at all the sort of social democratic goods that are enormously popular among American voters on actually both the right and the left, things people want to address climate change, people want Medicare for all, people want reasonable gun control. These are supported by clear majorities of American voters. And yet, because there are highly profitable enterprises or industries that oppose those things, we don't get them. And so I think everybody can understand that, you know, in a certain blunt way, money talks. And, you know, that there is something that is obviously anti-democratic about that. I think everybody actually already understands that in a certain way. And so it's just a question of getting people to follow the logic of that a little bit further.
You know, obviously the film is set in the United States, but I did think it was an interesting decision not to talk much about socialism in a European context or to make comparisons between the US and other countries. And I'm guessing that those conversations took place behind the scenes with your team about whether or not to do that. Why did you decide to keep it pretty much focused on the US?
Yeah, there are several reasons. I mean, one is I feel like that's sort of explored a lot. You know, I really loved Michael Moore's film, Where to Invade Next, and just felt like, oh, well, he just said all of that. There's not, you know, case closed. We know that. And sort of also wanting to really, you know, like I said, think about the American history, and that it is a homegrown, like it's in our DNA, it's been here the whole time, and we don't need to go look at Norway or Sweden and say like, oh, look, they have it. We can go to Milwaukee in the 40s. You know, like there are different places we can be here, and really trying to find examples like the Bank of North Dakota, you know, that we don't need to look at other places. And that might be more powerful.
Right. I think too, there's a sense that there's a fundamentally American character, or that America is an exceptional nation. And so if the argument proceeds from making a case in a foreign context, I think it's easy to dismiss that and say, well, those countries are racially homogenous, or those countries are small, or those countries are not, the great power in the world. And so if you can make the case that, that these ideas have had currency, that these politics have been experienced by farmers and workers as deeply fundamentally American, I think it's more persuasive.
So Bernie Sanders, you alluded to him earlier, and I just wanted to ask, as so 2016 was happening, the presidential campaign before you started on the film, sounds like, but the 2020 campaign, which took it to a whole nother level, was happening probably as you were finishing the film. And obviously there was a time when it looked like Bernie may actually be the Democratic nominee for president. Can you talk a bit about how the two Sanders campaigns, and more important perhaps, the grassroots support for his message and policies informed the filmmaking process?
I think we hoped, in some ways, we wanted this film to, I don't know, we wanted this film to be able to be relevant, whether or not Bernie succeeded in the 2020 election. We knew he was probably going to run, and we knew that he would be a front runner in some ways in this campaign cycle. And we also knew that when he ran, I think this is true. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. But when he ran in 2015, started running in 2015, I think DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, had something like 5,000, 6,000 members, mostly older members who had been around for years and years. And by 2017, 2018, there were 50 or 60,000 members. And then by 2018, you started to see DSA's endorsement, at least in a city like New York, becoming something that was sought after. You have, I think AOC gets elected in 2018, right? And so this sort of, obviously this is all still on the scale of national politics, small potatoes, but it's no less shocking because it's all incredibly new. And I think, in a time when, in a time of real sort of despair around American politics, this was a place you could look where you could see real hope and optimism, because there was a genuinely new development in American politics. And, sometimes I hear a lot of cynicism about where that will ultimately lead, or it feels, to people like it won't necessarily be effective, but it just can't be denied that all of a sudden you have many Democratic Socialists or Democratic Socialist endorsed candidates in the House, in state houses, getting elected to city councils all over the country. And so that phenomenon, I think it comes out of the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016, but I don't think that it is going to go anywhere. And I think that, the film, because of that, because there is this genuinely new force in American political life, and I think it's one that's only going to become more and more powerful within the Democratic Party, as much as they may try to strangle it to death in its crib. I think, and for that reason, I think the film is still, has something to say, in 2020 and beyond.
I want to ask you about the generational aspect of how, younger Americans view socialism and their willingness to consider voting for democratic socialist candidates, and support the ideals of socialism, kind of without any of the Cold War baggage that older Americans might bring to the discussion. Are we looking at a generational aspect to how socialism is perceived, and how these candidates and these issues and these perspectives may become more popular as this younger generation matures and enters politics themselves?
Yeah, I mean, the generational divide on this, I think, was also one of the more surprising things. I'd regularly be in a room of a group of socialists organizing and be the oldest person in the room. And I don't think of myself as being particularly old, but I had to check myself. I was like, oh, I am compared to you guys. But it's more that there would be like a giant gap, you know, so there would be people that are over 70, you know, or in their late 60s. And then a bunch of people under 30. And it really, I mean, just really clearly you can see, oh yeah, that was the really effective Cold War propaganda that just, you know, and that just decimated these ideas for so long, but clearly not forever, because they're coming back. So I think I'll be really, you know, it'll be exciting to see what the next decade or so looks like, when it is just really clear that young people just, you know, capitalism hasn't been working for them, and they can just see that abundantly. And, you know, I mean, I live in Oakland, everything is on fire if you're not talking about, you know, the relationship between the fossil fuel industry and why my state's on fire and why my power keeps coming in. And I mean, it's very clear, and I hope it becomes clearer.
So last question for both of you. If there's one thing you'd like people to take away from the film, what would it be?
I guess, you know, we talked a lot about who our ideal audience for this movie was. And in some ways, I don't think this movie is for that younger generation. I think, you know, they're so open to these ideas already, if they haven't fully embraced them, that it's not, and they're all around them. I mean, they're really sort of in the water online where people are living their lives a lot of time right now. So it's not really for them. It's more for, you know, that sort of tranche of people for whom the Cold War really made it sort of place these ideas out of the range of acceptable opinion, who still vote. You know, those are the people sort of, I think of maybe our parents' generation and a little younger, but, you know, people who really are in power right now in this country, who just think of these ideas as fundamentally fringe. And I think that, you know, what I would love for somebody to take away from this is these ideas are not fringe ideas. These are reasonable, concrete, actionable proposals that can help ordinary people's lives. And even if you don't embrace them, even if you don't agree with a specific policy position, these ideas are here to stay. They're a new fact. They're a new real part of our political lives as Americans, and they are worth engaging in and being open to. Maybe being critical of if you find them insufficient in some ways, but dismissing them, the green dream or whatever, as Nancy Pelosi said famously, that has to stop. You know, we don't have time for that. We can't afford that as a species anymore. So that's my hope.
I think about how we can expect better. Like there are things that we can do that we can only do together, and there are things that we can want to have, and we can also just expect to have them. And saying, oh, that's not crazy, that's unreasonable. But, you know, actually, no, you know, those are things we could have. We could have free healthcare for everyone. That's not pie in the sky. I think I'm just quoting other people in the film now. But it's been so ingrained in me that, you know, we have to learn to raise our own expectations a little bit. And that will involve like linking arms with other people, and that's okay. That's good.
Thank you both for being here with us today. Really appreciate you talking about how socialism can and has been as American as apple pie. And I want to just urge our audience to please tell your friends about the film. And it's going to be screening till the end of the festival. And we'd love to hear from you on social media at #AFIFest. And of course, you can find more films at fest.afi.com. Yael and Morgan, thanks again and congratulations on the film.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, AFI.